اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to ICZ's October 7th Majlis. Today, Brother Zohair will be starting with Quran and Salam. Brother Zohair, you can begin whenever you're ready.
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بطغواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد.
لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. السلام على من غسله دمه والتراب كافوره ونسج الريح أكفانه والقنا الخطي نعشه وفي قلوب من والاه قبره. صلى الله وسلم عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. ما خاب سيدي من تمسك بكم أمن والله من لجأ إليكم. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. يا غريب يا مظلوم كربلاء لست أنسى زينبا في الأربعين عندما أهوت على قبر الحسين قم أخي واستقبل الركب الحزين واسمع الشكوى من القلب الوجيع. بالأسى عدنا من الأسر الطويل وابن سفيان شفى منا الغليل. كلما أحكيه عن رزئي قليل فانظر الوجه ترى الحال الفظيع. وإذا بالصوت من تحت التراب أنت حقا زينب أم الحجاب. لا أخي لا إنني أم المصاب عن مصابي فاسأل الرأس القطيع. عدت في زندي من القيد جراح وعلى متني من الصوت وشاح. كل صوت صار في أذني نياح من كوفان والسجن المريع. أنت أمي وأبي أنت الحبيب كيف أنسى الشام والرأس الخضيب. فبها الأسنان أدماها القضيب ويتاماك ترى الفعل الشنيع. كل قبر عنده يعلو انتحاب ها هنا ليلى نعت ورد الشباب. يا أخي قد قطعت قلبي الرباب سألت عن حفرة الطفل الرضيع. الأمر والمرجع لله ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. وصلى الله على محمد وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.
Jazakallah, Brother Zohair. Now, the speech will begin for tonight.
الله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم به نستعين. الحمد لله الذي جعل الحمد مفتاحا لذكري وسببا للمزيد من فضله ودليلا على آلائه وعظمته. ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أرواحنا له فداء. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ما تعبدون من دونه إلا أسماء سميتموها أنتم وآباؤكم ما أنزل الله بها من سلطان إن الحكم إلا لله أمر أن لا تعبدوا إلا إياه ذلك الدين القيم ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. صدق الله علي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First and foremost, I give my condolences to each of you on the occasion which we are commemorating the aftermath of Karbala, the Shahadat of Imam Hussein, his companions, and his Ahlul Bayt, alayhim afdal salatu wasalam. and the captivity of Imam Zain al-Abidin, the women and children of the Ahlul Bayt. Inshallah, as we commemorate the Arba'een, the 40th day of the Shahadat, since the Shahadat of Imam Hussein, we will inshallah cover or give a commentary on the rights of the Sultan, Haqqul Sultan, as Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salatu outlined in the Risalat al-Huquq, or the Treaties of Rights. And it is the 15th right that Imam Zain al-Abidin, he outlines in that treatise. The Imam, he states that this right is the Haqqul Sultan. He begins by stating, وَحَقُّ السُّلْطَانِ أَن تَعْلَمَ أَنَّكَ جُعِلْتَ لَهُ فِتْنَةً وَأَنَّهُ مُبْتَلِيٌ فِيكَ بما جعله الله عز وجل له عليك من سلطان. So the Imam, he states that know that you are a fitna for the Sultan. And we'll explain these terms and what exactly the Imam is speaking about. That you are a trial for the Sultan. جُعِلْتَ لَهُ فِتْنَةً وَأَنَّهُ مُبْتَلَى or mubtalan bik, and he is also affected by you. He is also being tried by you, by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him over you in power and authority. So the first thing which stands out about the first line of this treatise, when Imam Zain al-Abidin, he's speaking about what that right is that one should know, one should have ilm, and one should have understanding of the dynamics of power. That there's a leader, there's someone who has authority, and there are those individuals who are led, who do not have authority, but they're the subjects or citizens of the person with power and authority. One of the 48 laws of power, and this is written by an author by the name of Robert Greene. It's very interesting. Of course, he writes the 48 laws of power from a position of how does one gain power or how does one maintain power, which is different from the treatise of rights of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salatu wassalam, but nonetheless it helps us to understand also the dynamics of power. So the first law of power is never outshine the masters. So if a person is not in the seat of power, he or she should recognize that there is someone in that seat of power, and if he or she wants to gain that power, they should not outshine or make that person in authority look bad. So in other words, there's still a recognition of that power dynamics that exist in society or in a company or whatever atmosphere or context you want to put that in. So Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi establishes this centuries before Robert Greene writes the 48 laws of power, stating that and ta'lam, so you should have understanding of that power dynamics. And why is it important to have an understanding of the power dynamics? One is, as the term is mentioned, Sultan, Haqqul Sultans. Sulta means power, means walaya, means authority. One needs to understand what that authority is and what is the basis of that authority. In verse 39 of Surah Al-Yusuf, that's chapter 12 of the Quran, verse 39, Yusuf, while he is imprisoned with his companions there, he begins a dialogue with him, a discussion. He says, Ya sahibi as-sijn, أأرباب متفرقون خير أم الله واحد القهار. So he questions them about the political and the hierarchical structure of authority that exists in Egypt at the time. He asks him, he says that, is it better to have these multiple arbab, sources of authority? Arbab and Rabb also comes here in a meaning of authority and sultan. So is this better, or to have one all-powerful Allah, one all-powerful authority, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And next, he talks about, in verse 40, again, Yusuf is strategically outlining what that power dynamic is in Egypt. And then he continues, he says, Ma ta'buduna min dunihi. So if you're worshiping other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it is only illa asma'an sammaytumuha. It is only the names and those things which you yourselves, or what the hierarchical authority that exists in Egypt at the time, that you have named this, you have created this. وَمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ بِهَا مِن sultan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not given any power or authority to these deities, or to what you are worshipping other than Himself. In al-hukma illa lillah. The rule and authority is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what Yusuf he is doing is outlining what exactly that power dynamic is in Egypt. If we look at the system of the pharaohs, the fara'ina, that their system was such that the pharaohs, they willed not only political power, but they were also the intermediaries between the people, between the masses and the deities. In other words, if the people, they believed in the deities and the gods, and whatever gods they were, of course, we can go into a little bit more detail, but which we're not going to go into this in this particular session. That some believed in the god of fertility, the god of death. So all of these deities, whatever deity it was, then the pharaohs were the intermediaries between those deity and the people. So the people could not worship those deities unless it was given permission, unless the pharaoh gave them permission to do so. And likewise, people would come to the pharaohs to pray for them, to the different deities. And that was also one of the hierarchical structures, that if you want to pray to the deities, then a person sometimes couldn't pray themselves. They would have to go to the pharaoh and have the pharaoh to pray on their behalf to the various deities. And this is also one of the interesting laws of power as well that Robert Greene, he writes about. He states that the person who is either in power and wants to maintain that power, or a person who is rising to power. So he says you play into the belief and beliefs of people. And if you control that beliefs of people, then again, you will also always maintain power over them. So Yusuf, he is pointing this power structure and power dynamic out to them. That on one hand, the pharaohs would be worshipped by the people, or their prayers and worship would depend on the pharaoh. Just as Pharaoh during the time of Musa, he told the people, or he said, "Ana rabbukum a'la," that there's no Rabb, there's no power greater than my power. Likewise, at the time, the two magicians that the pharaoh he hired in order to try to defeat Musa alayhi salam, that when they realized that what Musa is doing is not our magic, that Musa alayhi salam is connected to the divine creator. And so therefore they submitted and they said that we believe in Rabbi Harun wa Musa. And immediately Pharaoh, he said that, how can you believe before I give you permission? So this shows you the power, or at least that power dynamic that the pharaohs had in Egypt since the time of Yusuf, or before that time, all the way even to the time of Musa alayhi salam. So Yusuf, he questions that dynamics. He points that dynamics out and states that the true power actually lies with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That if there's any type of sulta, whether it be a power that whereby people are worshiping, people are understanding the metaphysical authority that exists in this world, in this universe, it ends with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It begins with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ends with it. Likewise, any social political power and authority in this world, in this universe, begins and ends with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that political system or authority that is willed by any man, it should be connected with the authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It should be connected with the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sends down. And we find this also, some of these aspects of powers even till today. Well, we don't have that same pharaonic system, the system of the pharaohs. But quite often, if you look at societies, even societies that don't claim that they are governing based on a theocracy, a divine law, nonetheless, many people look towards their leadership to see what type of people they are. Are they believing individuals? Are they believing people in the leadership whereby they will have some maybe check or metaphysical check to their power? This is quite often we find this in society, though there is still what we call, or what they believe in, this separation of church and state. In Islam, however, and as Yusuf, he's pointing out in Surah Yusuf, verse 39 and 40, that no, power and authority lies with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that power and authority is both spiritual and religious, and as well as as social and political. This sulta that Yusuf, he points out in al-hukm illa lillah, that power and authority is solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He also wills and He delegates to mankind. Of course, He delegated to all of our prophets, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down to them the teachings from the revelations, which connected themselves, and they were connecting others to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that not necessarily the prophets are intermediaries between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His creation, but they were the intermediaries only to deliver the message to mankind. But the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not something that a person would go to the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have the prophets make their salat for them, make their prayers for them. No, everyone made their own prayers. Of course, the tawassul, what we call, or you could say shafa'ah, where the prophet or the imams, they pray on behalf of someone. This is only an extra, you could say, supplication or dua on behalf of a person, but nonetheless, a person himself or herself was obligated to make their own prayers, to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what also Yusuf, he's pointing out to Sahib al-Sijn, the companions of the Sijn, that are these arbab al-mutafarriqun, are they better, or Allah wahid al-qahar, this one single deity that you pray to yourself? And likewise, that one single deity is also providing the most just and upright laws. And yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he delegates that power to His creation. One of the examples that we find in the Quran is in Surah Isra, verse 33, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where He says, وَمَنْ قُتِلَ مَظْلُومًا فَقَدْ جَعَلْنَا لِوَلِيِّهِ سُلْطَانًا, that any person who has been killed or murdered unjustly, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala delegates power or sulta to the guardians of that person. And so with that power, the guardian of the murdered individual is then able to determine whether the blood money is paid by the murderer, to determine whether the murderer will be put to death by capital punishment. So that sulta then goes to from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, based on his laws, to mankind. If we have a system like the Pharaonic system that Yusuf, he was pointing out to his companions, then that system would simply be based on those folks who are in the position of power. And the people who are in the position of power, depending on their understanding and their outlook of the world, this will determine what type of laws for governing that society would be developed. And we find that there are two types, at least as the Quran points out, of governance. That society which is based upon divine revelation, which is based upon divine authority. And the other is simply a worldly authority where the leadership, and perhaps even the people who are in that society, only sees this world as the beginning of and end of their existence. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he states about some people, their position and their viewpoint, وَقَالُوا إِنْ هِيَ إِلَّا حَيَاتُنَا دُنْيَا وَمَا نَحْنُ بِمَبْعُوثِينَ. That some people have this outlook on the world, that life is only limited to this world. And so if there's a leadership that believes that, then their entire system of governance will be based on their worldly interests. There's no metaphysical interests and how they govern, how they act, how they interact with people, what type of structure they establish of governance, because it would all go against those divine principles of justice, or some aspects of those divine principles of justice. Again, we go back to that point that Robert Greene, he made, that one of the laws of power is that you play on people's need to believe. So even if a leader does not believe that there's a divine authority over him or her, but their subjects, they do, then that leader will play into that belief, simply to maintain power. That they themselves don't believe it, but yeah, they will play into it in order to maintain their power. And this will reflect in how they govern. This will reflect in what type of system they put forth. Is it a system that maybe buys into that power, or plays into that belief of the subjects, whereby only a part of what they believe in is fulfilled, and not everything that they believe in is fulfilled. And 90% of what is fulfilled is what that leader believes in, or what that leader perceives as the reality of this world and this life. That after this, I won't be held accountable for, and I have to get all of my desires fulfilled in this world. So you'll find systems that are tribal, and the leader will only look out for their tribe, mainly look out for their tribe. Perhaps only in order to wield power and to have others to fight for them, to defend their system. Then they'll play into the beliefs of those folks. But their main goal will be to look out for the wealthy, look out for their own tribe, look out for perhaps their own race or ethnicity in order to maintain power, because there's no greater check with regards to their authority. On the other hand, if there's a leader and a people who believe that, no, there is a higher authority. Allah, al-Wahid al-Qahar, as Yusuf, he is telling his companions of the prison, that no, there's a higher authority that's higher than everything. And those people, they will understand, and they will have this belief, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he also points out, Ya ayyuhal insan innaka kadihun ila rabbika kadhan famulaqi, that you are traveling towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And surely you will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so everything that you do on that journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether you're a leader or whether you are a subject or a follower, everything will be taken account of. Everything. So in that type of situation, then the leader and even the subjects or those who are following, then they will be careful of their actions. In fact, each and every person will be careful. As the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he pointed out that every person in some way, in some manner, is a leader. He said, "Kullukum ra' wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyatihi." That each one of you are a shepherd, and each of you is responsible for your sheep, for your herd. And this is one of the translations and understandings of this particular hadith. وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. So every person is responsible, meaning they will be questioned. Who will they be questioned by? Of course, they will be questioned by the people that they're leading. That, okay, well, what are you doing? How are you leading me? Where are you leading me? But also, they will be questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to how they maintain justice, how they treated, how they interacted with those people who are following them. This is one thing that Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wasalam, he also pointed out to Malik al-Ashtar when he appointed Malik al-Ashtar to be the governor of Egypt. If you read that letter, very beautiful letter. In fact, even the UN, they stated that there was no government more just than the government of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. And if you want to understand just an aspect of that governance of Imam Ali, then read the letter of Imam Ali to Malik al-Ashtar. And therein, Imam Ali, he tells him just from the very beginning that many people have ruled over Egypt. Many authorities have come. And when those authorities have come and they've ruled over Misr, over Egypt, then the subjects, they were also always keen to see that what that authority was doing. Was that authority just or unjust? And Imam Ali, he says, yes, some were just, some were unjust. And it did not make a difference with regards to the people. They looked and they saw, they made their assessments, they made their judgments and their critiques of those who were leading and governing. Then Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, he tells Malik al-Ashtar, he says that no, that though you have been placed in a position of power and authority, know that there's someone above you in authority. And of course, what would immediately come to Imam, to mind, Imam Ali, he addressed. He says, yes, I have authority over you. I am the one who's appointing you to be the governor of Egypt. So you will be answerable to me. But then Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, he even goes beyond that. He says, and realize that even over me, there's an authority. And that very authority that is over me is also over you. And that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That both you and I, as Imam Ali, he's telling Malik al-Ashtar, both you and I will be accountable before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we will be questioned about how we governed, how we interacted with the people, how we interacted with those folks who are under our authority. About this sulta. So then Imam Ali, he tells him to make sure he establishes justice. And Imam Ali, he outlines a method by which Malik al-Ashtar is able to be a just ruler and a just governor over the people of Egypt. And how he is to, guide them based on the Quran, guide them based on the Sunnah of Rasulullah towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and keep them not in obedience of him as a governor, but in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if they are in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then of course, if you as a governor, as a person who has sulta, who has power and walaya over them, then they will also be obedient to you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with regards to this sulta, of course, as Yusuf, he told his sahib al-sijn, those companions of his in this prison, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give authority to this system which is existing in Egypt at the time, and that authority solely lies with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, we should understand that authority is solely with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Physically, or in this social political realm, and also within the metaphysical realm. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also denies authority and sulta, power and wilaya, to shaitan in the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's very precise about that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells shaitan, and of course shaitan, he says that he promises to misguide mankind, to take them off the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna ibadi laysa laka alayhim sultanun illa man ittaba'aka min al-ghawin. It says that you have no authority over my servants, over those creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who are worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are worshipping and connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But those among the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has fallen out of this realm of ibadah and ubudiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then yes, shaitan will have some authority and power over them. And this is as Imam Hussein alayhi wasalam, he made that statement in Karbala at one moment when he was gathered around some of the companions, some of the people between the tents. He said that istahwada alayhim shaitan. He says, yes, the people of Kufa, they made bay'ah to me. They claim that they will stand up for justice and what is right, but istahwada alayhim shaitan. However, shaitan has overpowered their minds to the point that the only path that they see before them is to murder me, to fight me. So it shows that those folks who stood against Imam Hussein, who stood against the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wasalam, that their sulta or their authority was not with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they can transgress that authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and follow the authority of shaitan. Because the abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in that shaitan has absolutely no authority over them. But because that authority of shaitan overpowered them and they fell out of the ubudiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the servitude of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we see that in Karbala, on the day of Ashura, Imam Hussein, along with his companions, and along with the menfolk of Ahlul Bayt, they were martyred on the plains of Karbala. Their heads were severed from their bodies. And then Imam Zayn al-Abidin and the women and children, they were placed in chains, imprisoned, ushered to Kufa and to Damascus. And according to the historical accounts, on the 40th they would return to Karbala. And according to some who write about that, it would be a year and 40 days, according to some accounts, that they will return back to Karbala to pay their farewell visit to the Shahadat of Karbala, to return the heads of the Shuhada to Karbala. Among those folks who had also come to pay their respects to the Shuhada of Karbala was the well-known companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari, along with one of his students and companions, Al-Atiyya. At the time that Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari he had reached to Karbala, he was already elderly and aged, and he was blind. So Atiyya was helping him, guiding him. And Atiyya describes that when we reached to Karbala, Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari, he went to the Euphrates, to the Furat, where he took a ghusl, where he washed himself to prepare for the ziyarat of Imam Hussein. And then he was led to the grave of Imam Hussein. And as he reached to the grave of Imam Hussein, he began to say, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, حبيب لا يجيب حبيب. He called the name of Imam Hussein 3 times. He says, and is it such that a beloved one, he will not respond to the one who he loves? But then Jabir himself, he began to answer. He said, وَأَنَّا لَكَ بِالْجَوَابِ وَقَدْ فُرِّكَ بَيْنَ بَدْنِكَ وَرَأْسِكَ. He said that, how is it that you will be able to respond? I know that my Habib Hussein, he will not be able to respond because his head was severed from his body. Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari, he began to give his salutations to the Imam, began to say, Assalamu alaykum ayyatuha al-arwah allati hallat bifana'i al-Hussein. He gave his salutations upon the Shuhada of Karbala, those who sacrificed their lives for Imam Hussein. And he did this, of course, after giving his salutations upon Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. And then Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari, as he was finishing his ziyarah for the Shuhada of Karbala, he says, Wallahi, وللذي بعث محمدا بالحق لقد شاركناكم فيما دخلتم فيه. He says, I swear by the one who has sent the Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sent him as the messenger, that we have joined and we were a part of this brave battle with you, O Shuhada of Karbala. That Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari, he was saying that he was like the Hur who went out onto the battlefield, who sacrificed his life for Imam Hussein, like Muslim ibn Awsaja, like Habib ibn Madahir, like Zuhair ibn Huqain, like all of those who went forth to sacrifice themselves for Imam Hussein. At that point, Atiyya, he says, how is this? How is it that we remained in Medina? Again, they didn't have the obligation to fight, but we get the sacrifice of those who fought and sacrificed themselves for Imam Hussein. At that point, Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari, he said that I heard my Habib Rasulullah, I heard Rasulullah say, Man ahabba qawman hushira ma'ahum, that whosoever loves a people, that he will be resurrected and raised with those people. Wa man ahabba amala qawman ashraka fi amalihim, and whoever loves the actions of a people, then they will be a part of that actions. Meaning that Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari, not only did he love Imam Hussein and the Shuhada of Karbala, that he loved their actions, that he wanted to be like those Shuhada of Karbala. And may we also be among those who love and truly love the Shuhada of Karbala, and we love their actions. Not only their actions on the battlefield, but their actions in their ibadah, on their prayer mat. Because we know that the Shuhada of Karbala, on the eve of Ashura. Before going onto that battlefield, it was their ibadah, their worship that gave them strength to fight and to sacrifice for Imam Hussein. And may we do the same for the Imam of our time. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our sins and cover our shortcomings. We ask Him to have mercy upon our deceased ones and to cure those who are ill among our friends and family members. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of Imam Zaman, make us among his helpers and his companions and those who sacrifice our lives for him. وإنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا وأي منقلب ينقلبون. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم اغفر ذنوبنا واستر عيوبنا وقضي حوائجنا واشف مرضانا وارحم أمواتنا وعجل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان واجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره والمستشهدين بين يديه وتحت لواء بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين. ماتم الحسين.
From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, 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 I left my heart in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. The luminous moon lighting the way, the rising sun that brightens the day. Heaven without you would be in flames. You're the heaven in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. Your visitors offer you their hands. Enemies will never understand. How can the water lose to the sand? How can the thirst win in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala? From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. Heaven is opening, Ya Hussein. Angels descending, Ya Hussein. They are reciting Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. The hand of God that nurtures the young, speaking for Allah, you were the tongue, separating his right from the wrong, elevated in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala, in Karbala, Karbala. The ship that sails swiftly through the waves, and whoever boards your ship is saved, immune from the punishments of the grave. Whoever mourns you in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala, from Karbala, 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 to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. When will we meet again, Ya Hussein? When under your dome will I grieve again? From Najaf I walked into Karbala, into Karbala, into Karbala. From Karbala, 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 to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. When will we meet again, Ya Hussein? When under your dome will I grieve again? From Najaf I walked into Karbala, into Karbala, into Karbala. From Karbala, 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 to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala, in Karbala, in Karbala. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. زيارة. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا أبا محمد الحسن بن علي، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. Everyone inshallah all together. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا تسعة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد والموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن صلوات الله عليهم أئمة. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. سيدي عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. Please recite الصلوات على محمد وآل محمد.